Do you know how many days it's been since Andrew Cuomo has made a public appearance?
I don't know that figure, but I bet you're going to tell me.
It has been 5 days. Now, I don't know if he is hiking a trail in the Appalachian Mountains, or
he's not a romantic. Like
he's not
guy.
a romantic like that. And the reason
he may have gotten a room at the C Street house, and he may be hanging out there. That's another possibility.
This is indicative of just how much trouble he feels he is in terms of this big report that came out by the New York Times. I mean, it is massive. But it is essentially centered around the Moreland Commission. And I've talked about this in the past. But he set this commission up in 2013. It was supposed to go 18 months long. It was supposed to deal with corruption in New York State politics, which, there's plenty of. 18 months, probably not a long enough time. But he shut it down after about 8 or 9 months, saying that the commission's done with its business.
Yeah, they've done their work. We're done.
And
that kind of thing.
Now, the statutory framework of this commission is ambiguous, but the issue is that Cuomo clearly told the commission not to pursue, or his administration, I should say, not to pursue anybody who was any way involved with him or his friends in multiple occasions, it seems.
They had so many excuses. They're like, well, this was just set up to look at the legislative branch. And then they were like, well, we're looking at the guys who did the TV ad buy for you. So that, and then they'd have to make up another thing. Oh, well, no, we're not looking at consultants. The thing is they kept finding the excuses for why these guys couldn't look into anything with a connection to Cuomo. Does this not seriously, like, pretending to be the anti-corruption guy, being the fiscally sound guy and all this stuff, is this not just completely a ring of the same exact thing of the other guy across the Hudson with the slightly bigger waistline?
Indeed.
I mean, these two guys should share a cell together somewhere. Is really what should happen.
I think there's a good question as to whether or not you could have a tri-state area penitentiary where it's just a governor's wing. And
that's right. In Connecticut, really, pretty much every other governor goes to prison. So.
But here's, this story gets very interesting because there's a lot of different things at play here. Now, let's assume for a moment that this is actually not a legal issue for him. And I got to say, the Southern District of Manhattan, the U.S. attorney there, Preet Bharara, seems intent on pursuing this. There's grand juries. But what's really clear is that Cuomo feels there's some potential political damage here. And I don't know.
That would be a good sign for why he's been hiding out for over 100 hours.
And what's happening, though, is interesting because Rob Astorino, who is the Republican. Now, remember, Zephyr Teachout is running against Cuomo in the Democratic primary. So she is out there pushing this, and she could not be a better spokesperson.
Her whole thing has been, since the beginning, one of her whole things has been campaign finance reform and anti-corruption.
Yes.
So this is right in her wheelhouse, too, to hit him over. Let's just say this is an interesting aside. And I'm sure you're in the same position as me, Sam. I have a lot of friends who are, involved in the Working Families Party and some of the other groups in New York that made that deal with Cuomo, on what he would deliver on, which really they extracted a lot from him for their endorsement. But I do have to wonder if they're sitting there, right now saying perhaps that wasn't the best idea.
Yeah, I'm actually very curious about that as well. Now, they have the ability, I think, and certainly they have in the past. I think in 2010 they did this. They endorsed someone else and then pulled that endorsement and ended up endorsing Cuomo in the end. I gotta feel like they're sitting there going, I wonder if we made a mistake here. But set that aside for a moment.
Yeah.
Astorino apparently had a conflict with Chris Christie. Chris Christie is the Republican Governors Association head. He's supposed to go around and raise money for Republican candidates for the governor's office.
But he seems to have what you would call a non-aggression pact with Cuomo.
Yes.
I won't mess with you. You don't mess with me. Because let's face it, sadly, a lot of the same people are funding both of them.
True.
And so they seem to have so Christie has found his way to skip New York and go to Connecticut and other places to do these fundraisers. And man, did Astorino open up a can of whoop ass on him, which maybe you've got that quote in front of you. I don't know.
I don't have it, but he laid into him. But I mean,
on the bridge gate.
Oh, right. Well, I mean, that's the point. Okay, look, I can understand why. I mean, I understand that they have the same funders, right? Ken Langone and the hedge funders and probably big real estate, et cetera, et cetera. But it really does not make sense as to why Chris Christie would not be raising money to challenge Governor Cuomo unless Governor Cuomo had something that he could really punish Chris Christie with. Now, we know that story about how Chris Christie called Cuomo in the early days of the bridge scandal being revealed, basically saying, tell your guy on the other side of the bridge, the other side of the Port Authority, not to be so aggressive in looking for why we shut down that bridge. And one wonders what information each other has on each other to create this dynamic. I mean, it is not common. I mean, it's one thing for two senators who come from the same state back in the day when one was a Republican and one was a Democrat to sort of like professional courtesy, I'm not going to come out and campaign hard against you.
Right.
But a governor from another state who's the head of the RGA not raising money for another governor candidate, that's strange.
It's more than strange. I mean, he literally is not doing his job. It would be like the one of the Senate or House committees not spending money on an incumbent, which is what their reason is for existence, to protect incumbents first and obviously try to gain a majority next. I mean, the reason for the existence of the governors' associations are to get your governors elected, to raise money for all your guys. Now, there's some that you may think have a better chance than others, and there's some you spend more time raising money for others, but you don't snub people. And I have to agree with you. I think that it's a non-aggression pact probably built on a number of things, but my guess is, one of the big ones might just be that that there are things that Cuomo knows that Christie would rather Cuomo not speak about.
Right, indeed. But
you know what, being that they do have the same funders and probably some of the same consultants, I bet that would be an easy one to look up in 2 seconds. Who knows if Christie may know some things about Cuomo and the Moreland Commission that just came out. I mean, it's certainly possible. I mean, we need to get Francis Ford Coppola in here to make a movie to sort this whole thing out.
No kidding. So we'll see if Zephyr Teachout can make gain some ground off.
I think you're going to see her do that. I mean, I think inevitably she'll gain some ground. His numbers will go down somewhat. And I think it's going to depend a lot on how much worse this gets. I mean, can he run out the clock? Maybe he can before it gets bad enough, because he's so far ahead of Astorino right now. But I mean, we've seen crazier things. I mean, when in polling and then in these kinds of numbers, when something reaches a tipping point and there's a huge change, you can see a wave of support go from one person to another like that. And so I wouldn't count anything out at this point. I mean, if another shoe or let's say an entire foot or a leg, maybe floating around the Hudson, drops on Cuomo, who knows, man?
Now, and before I get an IM saying, hey, she's got no chance and whatnot, there's two things that I think are really clear here. One, Cuomo's not making any public appearances, which is, after 5 days, is sort of crazy in a way. I mean,
I would want the person, I'll say this quickly, I would want the people here to speak up. You get an IM saying she has no chance. I would want the people here who are fully confident that Bill de Blasio had a chance, the slightest chance, a year out from that election, of not only winning his primary in a huge way, but winning with 70+% of the vote. If you are out there and you predicted that, then you have a right to tell us whatever you want right now. Otherwise, I could give you 20 other cases like that where somebody was so far out as to be basically ignored. There was a candidate named Hillary in 2008. Nobody could beat her either. Party primaries are funny things when a wave starts going and somebody catches it. And it can be due to corruption or other factors, but don't count anybody out.
This definitely expands the playing field, as it were. I mean, in terms of who would be attracted to Teachout's candidacy because of the corruption. You know, it's not just about ideology; it's about good government. But here's one more.
You need to look. I'll say quickly. You need to look at, because yes, Cuomo's still by far the favorite. So don't get me the wrong way. But you need to start looking at not only if other stuff comes out, but if people start backing away from Cuomo, not wanting to be publicly seen with him, rescinding endorsements, things of that nature. If those kinds of things start happening, then I would start really paying attention.
And there's one other indicator that apparently there has been protesters following Zephyr Teachout. Not many, like 10, 15, a squad, it seems. And they seem to be showing up at a lot of her campaign functions. And they hold signs sort of claiming that she's not from New York State because she had moved to Vermont. She hadn't set up her residency, according to them. You know, like sort of almost like LaRoucheite type of things, right? I mean, because this has been adjudicated. And who hangs on to that stuff? The idea of carpetbagging, this isn't 1943. This is, 1937 or, 1925, where it's like, he's a carpetbagger. Yeah, New York is so fundamentally different from Vermont that we don't.
I know. There's really
because we have Senator Hillary Clinton. She didn't grow up in New York.
Right.
This
happens all the time. I mean, we're at a point now. Exactly. It's not like it used to be, where people generally stayed in the region they were from. We didn't have these things called airplanes. I would say that
in New York of all places too. It's not like there's a lot of native New Yorkers, but it's there's also New York is one of those cities in the country where a lot of people come from another place. But here's the interesting thing.
I would say just quickly, the only exception to that is if it's a case like Scott Brown, where you've lost in one place and you're just shopping for a place to run.
Right.
But yeah.
Right.
But
she's clearly living here, and she was not like, just last week I ran in Connecticut, so I'm going to move to New York.
Exactly.
But here's the thing. This is what's so interesting about this. So the guys, Hunter Walker and Colin Campbell, and they're from, I think, what's the name of their outfit? Business. I can't remember where they write for, but
who'd you say? I'm sorry.
Business Week, is it? I think maybe it's Business Week. Business Insider. And so they followed. None of these protesters would speak with reporters. Now, that's weird, because when you go to protest a candidate or anything, what you're trying to do is to get reporters to talk to you. Right? That's what they.
Right.
None of them would talk, and they all covered their faces with their posters when people were trying to take pictures of the protesters.
Because they don't want you to see kind of like the Brooks Brothers riot down.
Well,
in,
they're
Florida.
all dressed in
take a picture of one guy, like, hey, that's Cuomo's aide from when he was at HUD, and another guy. I mean, it's so funny.
Right. I mean, well, it turns out that these protesters, all dressed in Business Friday casual attire. One of them on the subway was seen.
You have to have your Brooks Brothers if you're going to be in a Brooks Brothers.
To have an ID for SL Greene Realty. Now, this is relevant for two reasons in our conversation. One, Stephen Greene of SL Greene Realty, which is one of the largest commercial real estate enterprises in New York City. I mean, I think at one point, their market capitalization was something like over $1 billion. Still may very well be. In fact, probably is even bigger than that. He is one of Cuomo's top 10 corporate campaign donors. And these guys at Inside Business, Business Insider, have the idea that these kids, essentially, one was a college student because they followed him back to NYU, and then the guy cursed them out. Are
That's what's so amazing
interns
about these things.
for
They're
Stephen
so lazy
Greene.
that they can't find kids a couple degrees removed from. You know what I mean? They got to bring somebody with the name of his dad, who's. I mean.
Well, no, it's not him. They have IDs from Stephen Greene.
Oh, I'm sorry. I gotcha.
That they're interns at entry level workers at Stephen Greene Enterprises. Now, the interesting thing, too, from my perspective is I know Stephen Greene. I met
You do,
Stephen
don't
Greene
you? You
at
have
one
this
point.
sort of strange history with him and some family members of his. if I
He
remember.
was a former owner of Air America. Now, he was in absentia. He basically had given Mark Greene the money.
Which
and
worked
Mark
out very
Greene-
well.
Yes, it worked out great because Mark Greene pretended like his brother was going to give him more money, and then the morons who were in charge of Air America at that time said we didn't need that much anyways, and they were both lying. And of course, that's when that rendition of there seems to be a habit, as far as I can tell, in the radio industry of saying, "Oh, sure, that's not going to be a problem. We've got that funded. No worries."
Yeah.
But I mean, obviously Stephen Greene tied into this sort of the neoliberal side of and the big money side of Democratic politics. And in fact, in New York City, even de Blasio is heavily tied into the real estate industry. This is where all the big money is.
Sure.
So it's going to be interesting to go and see. I mean, there are two projects I want to engage in right now. And one is I would like to spend my days following those kids to find out who they are.
Why don't you show up at a couple of rallies?
Well,
and
that's the thing.
Engage them with microphone in hand.